Good morning. Happy Friday, everyone. Meteorologist John Homenuk with Empire Weather. Hope you all are doing well and had a wonderful week. Getting ready for a holiday weekend here coming up. And obviously one of the biggest weekends in agriculture as we're approaching a critical time of year, and the long-range forecast in specific getting very sensitive for the mid-July period as we move forward. So here's the current situation across the belt. It is a calm day for many folks, especially in the northern plains here. You can see that this storm system in the center of your picture is moving to the south. It's also warm and dry here further south across much of the Arlatex region, Oklahoma, eastward into parts of the Ohio Valley. This storm system is producing some scattered showers, thunderstorms, and cloud cover, and it will move gradually off to the east and then southeast today. With some light precipitation possible. But this is far from the main focus of the forecast. We do put out regional videos breaking down kind of hour by hour, day by day. So if you do subscribe to those, we'll have the details on this for you there. Otherwise, a quiet day throughout the belt. Let's take a look at what's gone on over the last 24 hours across that same region, and it's been relatively quiet. I mean, much of the Ohio Valley hasn't seen much go on this week, which is well forecast. You can see this area of dryness here that has kind of become established. It's also been pretty dry in the last 24 hours across the northern plains as well. The majority of that precipitation has come from scattered showers and storms that developed yesterday in southeastern Minnesota, moved into parts of Wisconsin and Michigan over the last 24 hours. And then we also had some thunderstorms upslope coming off the Canadian Rockies, the Colorado Rockies into parts of northwestern Kansas, some needed rainfall in this region, and the panhandle of Nebraska as well over the last 24 hours. If we run that back to the last 72 hours, you can see really what we've been talking about. It's been dry across much of the ag belt here, with the exception being those regions we just talked about that aren't included on this chart over the last 24 hours. So it's been a quiet week, basically, is what we're getting at. Here's the latest information from the U.S. Drought Monitor. This got a lot of attention yesterday, and rightly so. We obviously continue to see these widespread drought conditions in the Southwest, extending up into the Central Plains, the Western Plains, all the way down here across Texas, much of Texas, in at least severe drought. And then we've seen the expansion of drought conditions across the Ohio Valley. This got a lot of attention when this drought report came out a couple days ago. And one of the main reasons is that this is short-term drought development across this region. And let's break down exactly what that means. Here's the last 4 weeks. So this is the 4-week change in the drought conditions. We've largely had improvements across the plains, the Rockies, down into the Texas Panhandle. There's been rain here that's been much needed. That has not been the case across the Ohio Valley. It's very specifically in this region, from parts of Missouri eastward into Illinois and Indiana. This area in particular is seeing quite a bit of dryness. Very little rain over the last couple of weeks, and also down into parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. Let's not forget about these regions, because this area has been quite dry as well. And this is not just a small change. This is a 1 or 2 class degradation in drought conditions. So these conditions have developed quickly across this overall region. And it's not surprising the reasons why. If we look at the last 14 days of precipitation and we zoom into that area, let's check out the precipitation percentages of normal, right? So this is last weekend's rain event showing up. This is last weekend's heavy rains across Iowa and parts of western Illinois. That's the only reason why this map isn't beat red all the way through. Instead, if you look at this area from Oklahoma through southern Missouri, western Kentucky, up here into Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, all of these areas are seeing severely dry conditions here. I mean, this is very impressive, especially really in this area, which is an important region of Indiana and Ohio for agriculture. It's just been extremely dry in this area. In fact, these are the rankings out of the last 130 years of the last 2 weeks. So the last 14 days of precipitation, your rankings. This area here in central and eastern Indiana and Ohio has had their driest period in 130 years. So ranking 130 out of 130 for those last 2 weeks. Ending on the 30th of June in this area. And even in the area surrounding it, it's still impressively dry. I mean, we're top 10 driest in the last 130 years in this region. And then we also see some of the same here in this western region here in parts of western Iowa as well. So all this is to say that we have a region of concern that is developing. And you can see it quite clearly here from the southern plains into parts of the Ohio Valley, as this drought has begun to expand into these areas. And also a secondary area of concern here in the central plains and northern plains. So that's kind of the baseline for this forecast and the areas that we're going to be most concerned about as we move forward, and critically important into next week. So let's check out the pattern overall, and we'll go back, and we do this with every long range video, and look at what's going on. So we still have, very much as of this morning, the same pattern in place. We have the continued trade winds and the La Nina development. This is the pattern that's consistent with a La Nina pattern. We have impressive La Nina effects on the overall pattern. We also have warm waters here in the Central Pacific, North Central Pacific, north of Hawaii, that ridging built in. And then we still have our Gulf of Alaska troughing signal showing up. There's been some changes overall in the orientation of this. If we back this up and take a look at how it's changed over the last couple of weeks, recently we've seen the expansion of this warm water a bit here across the Western Pacific, North Central Pacific. So this has kind of begun to extend a little bit further off to the north and east. You can see that development there, compared to where we were a couple weeks ago when we had this deeper troughing developing off the west coast. And that'll come into play, I think, at some point. But overall, what we're largely seeing is the same pattern and circulations, which are this La Nina effect and the trade winds continuing. We have the ridging here north of Hawaii, and then the troughing off the west coast, with that ridging support across the central U.S., with to be determined where that ridging exactly sets up. Here's the current pattern as it stands right now, and we've talked quite a bit about the importance of this large upper level ridge here that pushed north of Alaska. This led to that drop down of cooler air, the northwest flow across the plains here through this week. We saw the cooler temperatures and a drier pattern as well that kind of got established. And that's all thanks to this large ridge that pushed northward and then took this air from Canada down here through the Canadian prairies and into the northern plains. That led to this drier and somewhat cooler period across the plains. As we move through the next couple of days, we've talked about this as well. That pattern is going to change, and quickly. That ridge is going to start to break down, right? So we see, as it stands right now, we have this large ridge development. But then as we move into next week, this weekend and early next week, that ridge begins to break down. And most importantly, this large trough here over south central Canada begins to move off to the north and east, back towards a position closer to Hudson Bay. And you can see that happen. That allows this ridge, which has been sort of just hiding in the shadows down here, to expand back to the north. And you'll see this ridging begin to come back here as we move into the early part of next week. However, as that occurs, this large trough also develops off the west coast, and that flow is going to begin to tap into early season monsoon moisture that's been sitting here in the Four Corners in New Mexico. And so while initially this ridging pattern could seem concerning as we move into next week, the orientation of the pattern and the flow around these two troughs is going to just help us here with this moisture coming out and over the top of this ridge into the northern plains, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley as we move into the early and middle part of next week. All of this kind of coming together for the possibility of storm threats during that time frame. Here's the reasons. We talked about that moisture coming out of that region there in the Four Corners, and here's the visualization on it. This is valid the middle of next week. So we have all of this moisture, this reservoir of moisture just sitting here, right? And we talked about the trough. We know that that's coming in. We have multiple disturbances coming over the top of this out of the Pacific, right? So these individual disturbances are going to be able to tap into this moisture and bring storm complexes down here through the upper Midwest, down into the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and then eventually probably into the southeast and parts of the east coast as well as we move into the middle part of next week. Look at this highway of moisture that develops here, right? We've been in such a dry pattern across this region. Look at this highway of moisture that forms over the next couple of days. There's your first surge. We have another one here. This is Wednesday. Here's Thursday. Here's Friday. And then, so really the visual here that we want to get across is this is just a very consistent highway of moisture and opportunities across this region as we move into the first week of July. This is valid for the first week of July. So if we know we have these disturbances coming down, we have this reservoir of moisture and the ability for it to come up over the top, this area here should be the focus of attention for multiple thunderstorm complexes and development of storms capable of producing heavy rainfall. This is the area that loses out. The southern plains and maybe even parts of the central plains This will oscillate back and forth, but this is the area that loses out where this moisture here that's sitting here comes over the top and misses this area, because this is where the upper level ridge is sitting, and you can see that. You can see this area misses out on that all the way through the extended forecast, right? It doesn't really matter where we start or where we end. It's this region here is not getting into this moisture. All that moisture comes over the top here into the Midwest, the Ohio Valley. And this is critical moisture for this area next week. We talked about the drought, right? We just went through this about how this area has been so dry and really needs this moisture as we come into the pollination period. Well, here's our chance at this. We're going to have multiple shots at this as we move into next week. So let's break them down and check out what's going on. We talked about the moisture. We talked about the flow around the high pressure. What we're looking at here is atmospheric instability. So this is called CAPE, and that means convective available potential energy. So what CAPE does is it tells us really what these thunderstorms have to work with. And for example, this is valid on Monday afternoon. And as this moisture is kind of just feeding into this area, and we have the moisture even coming over the top here feeding, and it leads to this reservoir of CAPE across the northern plains, down here into the Midwest, and then down into the Ohio Valley. And so when we get these storms to form and develop here in the northern plains, you can easily visualize how they would be able to tap into this reservoir of instability and really get themselves going, dropping down here from the northern plains into the Ohio Valley over time. Even if we back this up and look at the Zero-Z last night's European run, you can see how this reservoir of moisture and instability just becomes established across this region. This is impressive. I mean, these are not small values, and without getting into too much technical detail about what it means from a thunderstorm perspective, this is just setting the stage for multiple thunderstorm complexes across this area during the middle of next week. Let's take a look at vorticity and the kind of the forcing in the atmosphere for what could help these storms to develop. So we have some initial disturbances that come through this weekend, and it's possible that they produce some precipitation across the central plains eastward into parts of the Ohio Valley. We're expecting these to be a little bit more isolated. There's not quite as much moisture to work with yet. But as we move into Sunday and Monday, here's one of the first disturbances that comes over the top of the ridge here. You could see it. It moves Sunday night into Monday, and it develops across really the Dakotas, and then shifts eastward into Minnesota and rides this ridge off here into the Northeast states, eventually Monday into Tuesday. So that's the first one where the models are telling us, hey, look, we have some vorticity. We have some chances to get precipitation going. And if we look at the individual model projection, lo and behold, Sunday night into Monday, here's our first system that forms. And verbatim on the European model, Sunday night and Monday morning, it moves across Minnesota, the Dakotas. It ends up moving eastward Monday into parts of Wisconsin, and then kind of weakens with some scattered storms developing Monday into Tuesday across the Ohio Valley. But that's just the first system, right? That's just the first opportunity at this. As we move into Tuesday, we see yet another disturbance forming here. Here's another kind of piece of vorticity coming over the top here. And remember, we have this reservoir of moisture and instability building. So these things don't need to do much. They just need to kick off these storms. And if we look at the European model, here comes another one. This is Tuesday afternoon now. And not only do we have scattered showers and storms across the Ohio Valley and southeast, but we have this complex developing Tuesday afternoon. And the European model says, hey, you know what? This thing has no reason not to keep going. So it drops it from Minnesota straight down here into parts of Illinois, Indiana. This is valid early Wednesday morning. This is the track of this complex. It drops all the way down here throughout this region into Wednesday morning. And on Wednesday morning, about 10, 11 a.m., it ends up in Ohio, Illinois, and parts of Kentucky. And that's, kind of the next system. So that's number 2 on the European model. Again, this is verbatim, but just to give us an idea. And then we look up on Wednesday morning, and guess what? We have another one. Here's another disturbance coming up over the top here. And this one ends up moving off to the east and southeast. And if we back up and look at what the instability profile looks like, guess what? There's a whole reservoir of instability and moisture for these to form. So this next disturbance, the European model on Wednesday afternoon says, oh, well, here comes another one. So this one lights up again across the Dakotas, Iowa, parts of Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, and it's on that same track. It's on that same reservoir of instability. And it ends up forming, this one's starting to look like, down into parts of the Ohio Valley Wednesday into Thursday. And on Thursday and Friday, it ends up kind of meandering around this area. So backing up, all this is to say, every model that we have is telling us there's going to be multiple disturbances developing and moving through this region. Now, with this kind of instability in place across the atmosphere here, across this region, and we know we have the wind shear with these individual disturbances coming down, there is some concern that these storms, in addition to producing the rain we need, could produce strong wind gusts as they move down. That is something we're going to have to watch. The Storm Prediction Center has mentioned it this morning, and they said every day next week we're going to have to be careful and watch for the possibility of strong wind gusts. So, kind of a catch-22 possibly with some of these storms developing. There could be heavy rain, but there could also be wind as these develop here in the northern plains and then move down into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley next week. However, I think we will take our chances with that for these areas that really need the rainfall through the end of next week. Here's another look at this. We'll break it down just one by one. Here's Sunday night into Monday. Here comes our first complex. You can see it kind of weakens as it makes its way down into the Midwest and Ohio Valley, ends up shifting off to the south and east. Then Tuesday, we get another complex. So this one moves down from Minnesota and Wisconsin into parts of the Ohio Valley on Tuesday into Wednesday. Right? Even Wednesday morning, we still have some stuff lingering in this area. Then we get another one Wednesday into Thursday. This is valid Thursday morning. So here comes our next kind of Boeing line of showers and storms on Thursday. You can see that drop down. And then we get other scattered showers and storms late week. This is valid into Friday morning as these move through. So on the European model, verbatim precipitation, if we take it 7 days from today and we look at where we are in the next 7 days, we'll run this all the way out. Here's where we're at. And you can see very clearly the track of these storms and where they are. This is the area where these storms track down. And this is the region that, needs the rainfall, but also models are in great agreement that this rainfall will exist. If we back up just for a second and look at the ensemble during that same time frame, just to pull up the anomalies over the next 7 days, this is a very clear region of above normal precipitation across parts of this, the Midwest down into the Ohio Valley and areas that really need it. So we'll need to verify these individual complexes, but it's becoming clear now that we will have multiple chances at this next week as we move through this time frame. Again, we mentioned it will be very important because this area is drier and they need the rain, and we need to verify these above normal precipitation departures. And if we look at the 7-day precipitation totals on the European model, to see the ensemble showing 1 to 2 inches of rain across this broad area is great, and we need to verify that during that time. Backing up just for a second, taking a look at the temperatures during this period, you could see the warmth begins to expand again. This is valid through Wednesday, July 6th. We'll run the 5-day through the end of next week, and you can see we are several degrees above average in this area here, from the plains all the way out into the Ohio Valley, several degrees above average. That'll be in particular overnight. Lows look quite warm as well. And so this, again, a lot of pressure on these storm clusters to verify, but we have the setup and we have the instability to do it. And so the confidence is quite high that these storm clusters do happen. Let's look beyond that a bit and take a look out to the middle part of July. So we know we have this pattern in place here, the trough drawing upon this moisture reservoir coming up over the top here, and these storm cluster chances continuing. As we move into the middle part of July, models are suggesting that the ridge axis will begin to back up to the west. You can see it kind of centered here in the four corners. Now, this does a couple of things. It complicates the forecast. For one thing, the MJO progression that we talked about is continuing. We have some propagation here and some momentum into this pattern. That should help to keep moving things along here. And this ridge ending up, where it is I think something that we're going to have to monitor, right? Because how amplified does it get? But that MJO propagation should keep at least some storm chances coming out of the Pacific and keep this active kind of cooler trough in New England south of Hudson's Bay, at least for a while as we move through the next couple of weeks. As we move to the end of July, the forecast becomes a bit more uncertain. This is the model showing subsidence or kind of suppressing convection in the Central Pacific during this time frame. And I think that's something that we're going to have to watch really closely as we move towards this time frame, specifically because if this ridge amplifies too much, the storm track and the storm clusters go over the top here into the Canadian prairies, and that would obviously be less than ideal. But if we look at the moisture forecast over the last couple of days, we see some reinvigoration now of this moisture reservoir that had been here recently. As recently as a couple days ago, the models were suggesting that would not be in place. But as we move forward, as we move closer to the middle of July, there is some signal now that there'll be some moisture hanging out in this area. Now, if we go back and look at what the upper levels look like during this time frame, that would suggest the possibility still that these storms could come over the top of this ridge and develop into this region, sort of a ridge runner setup, especially with this trough kind of lingering here in New England. That would allow these storms to come up here and keep the jet stream down into this area. If we look specifically at the jet and look at what the European model is suggesting, that's exactly what we see, right? We see the Pacific trough developing and the likelihood that storm clusters would come over the top into this region. We also notice that ridge retrograding and ending up back further west. Here's your circulation. The main areas of concern in this forecast through the extended continue to be the southern plains. There is just not much support for rain, specifically here from central Texas into parts of Oklahoma and even parts of Kansas. There's very little support for rain in this, especially because the ridge starts off further east here. This is through the middle part of next week, but it backs up further west and just keeps this jet stream over the top of that region. If we are in the northern plains down to the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, these recent runs would suggest the possibility that this sort of active pattern, warmer and active pattern, could persist. But I want to just put out one major kind of, caveat and catch to the forecast, which is that as we get closer to this period, and especially as we lose this sort of coherency to the MJO with this sinking air in the Pacific, there is a risk that as we get to the end of this time frame, this ridging amplifies too much. And if that were to occur, we'd cut off the flow here and limit our moisture opportunities, with the jet stream likely positioning itself just a little too far north for a lot of these areas. So as we head towards mid-July, we know the temperature forecast looks warmer. The models are expanding that warmth. We know that. And basically, the current idea is that it's going to be sort of a razor's edge situation with this ridge given the opportunity to expand. As it stands right now, it looks like the area should be right on that periphery, with the possibility of these storm cluster chances continuing through the middle and end of July. But the catch here and the caveat to beware of in the forecast is that it won't take much to amplify this ridge and push the moisture flow, that highway which is benefiting us next week, out of the region into the Canadian prairies and northern plains. It won't take that much to do that. So this is a very, very sensitive forecast in the middle to latter part of July, which largely should come into focus by the time we are back with you early next week. So again, the highlights: we have a very active pattern coming up next week. We know we will have several chances at these storm clusters throughout the northern plains, Midwest, and Ohio Valley. It's going to be critical that we verify them across that region given the dryness over the last couple of weeks. We feel good about the storm chances, but we're going to have to pin these down over the next couple of days, looking like multiple chances from Sunday and Monday into Thursday and Friday of next week, with storm clusters possible every day. And then we watch for this pattern in the middle to latter part of July, currently looking like we'll be okay, possibly we'll be okay, but with warming temperatures and an expanding ridge, it won't take much to warm and dry this forecast out. We're going to be on the razor's edge over the next couple of days as we figure out the exact location of this ridging as we head into the middle and latter part of July. That's all we have for you today. As always, please do not hesitate to ask us any questions you might have. Big weekend coming up. We'll be with you the whole way. For now, enjoy your Friday. We'll talk to you guys real soon. Take care.